After my test for my so-called mystery illness, the nurse slipped a letter into my purse. "Madam, run from your family now." I froze instantly. But that night, I realized she had saved my life. 30 cops dragging my daughter-in-law away. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. I'm Thelma, and at 63, I never imagined that a simple hospital visit would change everything I thought I knew about my own family. That Tuesday morning started like any other, with me dragging myself out of bed feeling exhausted despite sleeping 10 hours. The persistent fatigue had been my constant companion for months, along with dizzy spells that came out of nowhere and stomach problems that made eating a daily struggle. My son Marcus had insisted I see Dr. Williams again. "Mom, you can't keep feeling this sick," he'd said, though his voice carried more annoyance than concern. Ophelia, my daughter-in-law, had been even more insistent. "Thelma, you really need to find out what's wrong. We're all so worried about you," she'd said with that sweet smile that never quite reached her eyes. The medical center was bustling with its usual morning rush. I'd been coming here for 3 months, test after test, and still no clear answers. Dr. Williams called it a mysterious condition, that phrase that doctors use when they don't know what's happening to you. Blood work, MRIs, endless consultations, and still I felt like I was slowly fading away. I sat in the waiting room, my hands trembling slightly as I held my purse. The trembling had started about 2 weeks ago, just another symptom to add to my growing list. Around me, other patients waited with that same mixture of hope and dread that comes with medical appointments. Some looked worse than others, but I wondered if I looked as awful as I felt. "Thelma Richardson?" The nurse's voice cut through my thoughts. She was a woman about my age, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her name tag read, Sarah. I followed her down the familiar hallway, past rooms where other people were getting answers I desperately needed. Sarah was unusually quiet as she took my vital signs. Usually, the nurses here were chatty, asking about family or the weather. But Sarah seemed nervous, constantly glancing toward the door. "How have you been feeling, honey?" she asked, but her voice was strained. "About the same," I replied. "Tired? Dizzy? Some days I can barely get out of bed. My daughter-in-law has been such a help, though. She makes all my meals now, helps with my medications. I don't know what I'd do without her." Something flickered across Sarah's face when I mentioned Ophelia. She busied herself with checking my blood pressure, but I caught the way her jaw tightened. "Mrs. Richardson?" she said carefully. "Have these symptoms been consistent? Do they happen all the time? Or are there periods when you feel better?" I thought about it. "Well, now that you mention it, I did feel a bit better last weekend when I visited my sister in Phoenix. But as soon as I got home Monday night, I started feeling awful again." Sarah's hand stilled on the blood pressure cuff. She looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something in her eyes that made my stomach clench. It wasn't just concern, it was fear. "Mrs. Richardson, I need to step out for a moment. Dr. Williams will be with you shortly," she said, her voice barely steady. After she left, I sat on the examination table, my legs dangling like a child's. The room felt colder somehow, and that persistent nausea that had become my constant companion seemed to intensify. I reached for my purse to find some antacids when I noticed something strange. There was a folded piece of paper sticking out of the side pocket, a pocket I never used. My heart began to race as I pulled it out with shaking fingers. The paper was white, folded small, and written in neat handwriting that I didn't recognize. I unfolded it slowly, and the words hit me like a physical blow. "Mrs. Richardson, leave your house immediately. Do not eat anything your family prepares. Do not take any medications they give you. Your life is in danger. Trust no one in your family. Go somewhere safe and call the police. This is not a joke. Someone is trying to hurt you very slowly. I've seen this before. Please, please listen to me. A friend who cares." My hands began shaking so violently I almost dropped the note. The words blurred as my eyes filled with tears. This had to be some kind of mistake, some cruel joke. But who would joke about something like this? And how did this note get in my purse? Sarah. It had to be Sarah. She was the only one who had been close enough, and her strange behavior suddenly made sense. But why would a nurse I barely knew risk her job to warn me about my own family? Dr. Williams came in then, his usual professional smile in place. "Thelma, how are we feeling today?" I quickly stuffed the note back into my purse, my mind reeling. "Fine," I managed to say, though my voice sounded strange even to me. He reviewed my latest test results, the same inconclusive findings we'd been seeing for months. "I'm afraid we're still looking at an unknown condition," he said. "Sometimes these things resolve on their own, but I want to run a few more specialized tests." I nodded, but I wasn't really listening. My mind was racing, trying to process what the note meant. Someone was trying to hurt me? In my own home? It was impossible. Marcus would never hurt me. He was my son, my only child, and Ophelia, despite our occasional differences, had been nothing but helpful during my illness. But as I sat there, fragments of memories began surfacing. Ophelia always insisting on preparing my meals herself, even when I said I wasn't hungry. The way she'd appear with my evening medications, making sure I took them while she watched. How she'd discourage me from visiting friends or going out alone, saying I was too sick and might collapse. "Mrs. Richardson?" Dr. Williams was looking at me with concern. "Are you all right? You look pale." "I'm just tired," I said, forcing a smile. "Can I go home now?" 20 minutes later, I was sitting in my car in the hospital parking lot, staring at the note again. My hands had stopped shaking, but my mind was in chaos. Part of me wanted to crumple up the paper and forget about it. Part of me wanted to drive straight to the police station. Instead, I started the car and drove home, the note burning like fire in my purse. As I pulled into my driveway, I saw Ophelia's car already there. She must have left work early again, claiming she needed to check on me. Through the kitchen window, I could see her moving around, probably preparing another one of her special meals to help me feel better. For the first time in months, looking at my own home filled me with dread instead of comfort. The white colonial house with its red front door suddenly looked different, almost sinister. The flower beds that Ophelia had planted looked less like a caring gesture and more like a cover for something darker. I sat in my car for several minutes, watching my daughter-in-law through the window. She moved with purpose, checking something in a small bottle before putting it back in her purse. The casual way she handled whatever was in that bottle made my blood run cold. The note in my purse felt like it was radiating heat. Someone had risked everything to warn me, and now I had to decide whether to trust a stranger's words or the family I'd lived with for 5 years. As I finally got out of the car and walked toward my front door, one thought kept echoing in my mind. What if the person slowly killing me was the same person who had convinced everyone, including me, that she was trying to save me? The moment I walked through my front door, the smell of something cooking hit me. Usually this would have been comforting. Ophelia was an excellent cook, and she'd been preparing all my meals since I'd gotten sick. But now, with that note burning in my mind, the aroma made my stomach turn. "Thelma, you're back!" Ophelia's voice rang out from the kitchen, bright and cheerful as always. "How did the appointment go? What did Dr. Williams say?" She appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. At 38, Ophelia was still strikingly beautiful, with glossy black hair and green eyes that sparkled when she smiled. She'd always been charming, which was probably why Marcus had fallen so hard for her when they met 6 years ago. Even I had been won over initially by her apparent devotion to our family. "He wants to run more tests," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Still no answers. Ophelia's face arranged itself into an expression of concern that now seemed almost practiced. "Oh, sweetie, that must be so frustrating, but don't worry, we'll figure this out. I'm making your favorite chicken soup. The recipe always makes you feel better." I watched her carefully as she spoke. Was I imagining the way her eyes seemed to gleam when she mentioned my continued illness? Was there something calculated about the way she immediately offered food? "Actually, I'm not very hungry," I said, settling onto the living room couch. "Maybe later." Ophelia's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second. "Thelma, you need to eat to keep your strength up. You barely touched your breakfast this morning." That was true. The breakfast she'd prepared, scrambled eggs with herbs, had tasted slightly bitter, and I'd only managed a few bites. At the time, I'd attributed it to my ongoing nausea. Now, I wondered if there had been something else mixed in with those herbs. I know, but my stomach has been so sensitive lately, I said, watching her reaction carefully. All the more reason to have some gentle soup, she persisted, moving closer. I added some special ingredients that should help settle your stomach. Trust me, I've been researching natural remedies for digestive issues. The word special sent a chill down my spine. I thought about the note's warning, do not eat anything your family prepares. What kind of special ingredients? I asked as casually as I could manage. Oh, just some herbs I picked up at that health food store downtown. Ginger for nausea, chamomile for calm, and a few others that are supposed to help with digestion and energy. She spoke quickly, almost defensively. I've been so worried about you, Thelma. You're getting so thin and weak. I had lost weight, about 20 pounds over the past 3 months. Everyone had attributed it to my mysterious illness, but what if it wasn't mysterious at all? That's very thoughtful of you, I said, forcing a smile. But I think I'll just rest for now. Ophelia's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. You know, Thelma, I'm starting to wonder if we should consider getting you some professional help. Not just medical, but maybe someone who can assist with daily care. You seem to be getting more confused lately. Confused? This was the first time she'd mentioned anything about confusion. What do you mean? Well, yesterday you couldn't remember taking your morning medications, even though I watched you take them. And last week, you forgot that we'd agreed you shouldn't drive yourself to appointments anymore. I stared at her. I remembered taking those medications perfectly well, the little white pills that Ophelia always handed me with a glass of water, and I'd never agreed to stop driving. She'd simply started insisting on taking me places, saying I looked too dizzy to be safe behind the wheel. I remember taking the medications, I said firmly. Ophelia's expression shifted to one of gentle pity. Oh, sweetie, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Memory issues can be a sign of serious underlying conditions. Maybe we should mention this to Dr. Williams. My heart began to race. Was she trying to make me seem mentally incompetent? The note had warned me not to trust anyone in my family, but surely this was just Ophelia being overprotective, wasn't it? Where's Marcus? I asked, suddenly needing to see my son. He had to work late again. Another crisis at the firm. Ophelia sat down across from me, her green eyes studying my face intently. But he's been so worried about you. We both have. Sometimes we lie awake at night talking about what we can do to help you get better. The way she said we made something cold settle in my stomach. Marcus and I had always been close, especially after his father died 8 years ago. But since he'd married Ophelia, I'd noticed changes in our relationship. He seemed more distant, more likely to defer to his wife's opinions about my care. I think I'll call him, I said, reaching for my phone. Oh, don't bother him at work, Ophelia said quickly. You know how stressed he gets when he's interrupted during important meetings. Besides, there's nothing urgent to discuss, is there? There wasn't. Not anything I could explain without sounding paranoid. How could I tell my son that a nurse had slipped me a note warning me about my own family? How could I voice suspicions that had no basis except a stranger's warning and my own growing unease? I suppose you're right, I said, but I made a mental note to call Marcus later from my bedroom. Ophelia smiled, but something about it seemed different now. Why don't you go lie down for a bit? I'll bring you some tea in a little while. That herbal blend that always helps you sleep. Sleep. I'd been sleeping so much lately, often for 12 or 14 hours at a time, and still waking up exhausted. Was that part of my illness or something else entirely? Actually, I think I'll stay up for a while, I said. Maybe watch some television. Again, that flash of annoyance across her features. Thelma, you need your rest. The doctor said sleep is crucial for recovery. Had Dr. Williams said that? I couldn't remember him emphasizing sleep specifically, but my memory had been fuzzy lately. Or had it? Was I actually having memory problems, or was I being told I was having them? I went to my bedroom, claiming I wanted to change clothes, but really I needed a moment alone to think. I locked the door behind me and pulled out the note again, reading it more carefully this time. I've seen this before, it said. That phrase stuck with me. Seen what before? Someone being slowly poisoned by their own family? The thought was so horrible I almost couldn't entertain it, but the evidence was starting to mount in my mind. My symptoms only seemed to worsen at home. I felt better when I was away, like during my visit to my sister. Ophelia was always the one preparing my food and handing me medications. She was discouraging me from seeing friends or going out alone. She was suggesting I was becoming confused and forgetful. She was positioning herself as my primary caregiver while simultaneously making me seem incompetent. I looked at myself in the mirror above my dresser. The woman staring back at me was pale and thin, with dark circles under her eyes. I looked sick, possibly dying. If someone wanted to harm me slowly, this is exactly how I would look. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Mom? Ophelia says you seemed confused again today. Are you okay? Maybe we should look into getting you some help." I stared at the message, my hands trembling again. When had I seemed confused? During our brief conversation about the doctor's appointment. There had been nothing confused about that interaction, but somehow Ophelia had already spun it differently to my son. I started to type a response, then stopped. What could I say? That I thought his wife was slowly killing me based on a note from a stranger? That I was starting to believe my own daughter-in-law was some kind of predator? Instead, I typed, "I'm fine, just tired. We'll talk tomorrow." But as I hit send, I knew that tomorrow might be too late. If the note was right, if someone really was trying to hurt me, then every meal, every pill, every cup of tea was potentially bringing me closer to serious harm or worse. I heard Ophelia's footsteps in the hallway, approaching my door. "Thelma, I have that tea ready for you, the one that helps you sleep." I looked at the door, my heart pounding. On the other side stood either a caring daughter-in-law with a cup of healing tea, or a predator with another dose of whatever was slowly destroying my health. For the first time in months, I knew I had to find the courage to find out which one was true. "Just a minute," I called to Ophelia through the door, my voice barely steady. "I'm changing clothes." I heard her pause outside my room. "Of course, take your time. The tea will stay warm." The tea. The same herbal blend she'd been bringing me every night for months. The one that made me sleep so deeply I often couldn't remember my dreams. The one that left me groggy and disoriented the next morning. I waited until I heard her footsteps retreat down the hallway before I unlocked my door and crept to the kitchen. The house was quiet except for the soft murmur of the television in the living room. Ophelia had returned to her soup preparation, humming softly to herself. From the kitchen doorway, I watched her work. She moved with practiced efficiency, stirring the pot with one hand while reaching into her purse with the other. I pressed myself against the wall as she pulled out a small glass vial, no bigger than my thumb. The liquid inside was clear, almost invisible. My blood turned to ice as I watched her unscrew the tiny cap and measure out several drops into the steaming soup. She did it so casually, so naturally, like adding salt or pepper. Then she screwed the cap back on, slipped the vial into her purse, and continued stirring as if nothing had happened. I backed away from the kitchen, my heart hammering so hard I was afraid she might hear it. The note was right. The warning was real. My own daughter-in-law was poisoning me slowly and methodically, meal by meal. I made it back to my bedroom and locked the door again, my whole body shaking. For several minutes, I just stood there, trying to process what I'd witnessed. This wasn't a misunderstanding or paranoia. I had seen her add something to my food with my own eyes, but what was it? And why was she doing this to me? I'd never done anything to hurt Ophelia. I'd welcomed her into our family, helped plan their wedding, given them money for their down payment on the house they lived in next door. What could possibly motivate her to want me dead? "Thelma?" Her voice came through the door again, sweet and concerned. "Your soup is ready. I brought it up with your tea." I heard the soft clink of dishes being set down outside my door. The same dishes that had been slowly killing me for months. "Thank you," I managed to call out. "I'll get it in a minute." "Are you sure you're feeling all right? You sound strange." Strange. Of course I sounded strange. I'd just discovered that the person I'd trusted to care for me was systematically destroying my health. But I couldn't let her know that I knew. Not yet. Just tired, I said. The appointment took a lot out of me. Well, make sure you eat and drink everything while it's warm. You need your strength. I waited until her footsteps faded completely before opening my door. The tray sat there innocently enough, a bowl of chicken soup that smelled delicious, a cup of herbal tea that looked perfectly normal, and even a small plate of crackers. To anyone else, it would have looked like a loving gesture from a caring daughter-in-law. I brought the tray inside and set it on my dresser, staring at it like it might explode. Then I did something I'd never done before. I took photos of everything with my phone. If I was going to prove what was happening to me, I needed evidence. Over the next hour, I heard Ophelia moving around downstairs, occasionally calling up to check on me. "How's the soup?" she asked once. "Are you feeling any better?" "It's delicious," I lied, really hitting the spot. I poured the soup down the bathroom sink and flushed the tea down the toilet, being careful to make it look like I'd consumed everything. Then I sat on my bed and did something I hadn't done in months. I actually felt alert and clear-headed. For the first time, I forced myself to think back over the timeline of my illness. It had started gradually about 4 months ago, just occasional fatigue and nausea. But it had gotten progressively worse, and now I realized the timing coincided perfectly with when Ophelia had started taking over my meal preparation. She'd made it seem so natural. "Thelma, you're not feeling well. Let me cook for you. Don't worry about making breakfast. I'll handle it. I picked up your prescriptions, and I'll make sure you take them on schedule." Prescriptions. My heart lurched as I thought about the medications Ophelia had been giving me. I went to my bathroom cabinet and pulled out the bottles. 3 different prescriptions, all for various symptoms I'd been experiencing. But when I looked at the labels more carefully, something was wrong. The pharmacy labels were legitimate, but they were old, from over 6 months ago, before I'd gotten sick. These bottles should have been long empty, but they were still half full. What had Ophelia been giving me instead of my actual medications? I unscrewed one of the caps and shook a few pills into my palm. They looked right, but I wasn't a pharmacist. For all I knew, these could be anything. More pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, and the picture they formed was terrifying. My phone rang, startling me. Marcus's name appeared on the screen. "Hi, sweetheart," I answered, trying to sound normal. "Mom, Ophelia told me you seemed really out of it today. She's worried you might need more intensive care. Maybe it's time we looked into assisted living facilities." Assisted living. My breath caught in my throat. "Marcus, I'm not that bad. I had a rough day, but—" "Mom, you've been getting worse for months. Ophelia's been keeping track of everything. Your memory lapses, the confusion, the times you've seemed disoriented. She's been documenting it all because she cares about you." Documenting it. Creating a paper trail that made me look incompetent and in need of care. A paper trail that would justify putting me somewhere I'd be even more vulnerable, even more isolated from anyone who might notice what was happening to me. "I don't want to go to assisted living," I said firmly. "It's not about what you want, Mom. It's about what's best for your health. Ophelia thinks—" "What do you think, Marcus?" I interrupted. "This is your mother you're talking about putting away." There was a pause. "I think Ophelia knows more about medical care than either of us do. She's been researching your symptoms, talking to professionals. She only wants what's best for you." The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. My own son was taking his wife's side over mine, accepting her version of my condition without question. He'd known me for 34 years, but he was trusting someone he'd known for 6 years to make decisions about my life. "Marcus, I need to tell you something. Mom, you sound agitated. Maybe you should take one of those sleeping pills Ophelia got for you. We can talk about this when you're feeling better." The sleeping pills. Another way to keep me docile and compliant while she slowly destroyed my health. "I love you, Mom," Marcus said before hanging up. "Everything's going to be okay." But everything wasn't going to be okay. I was trapped in my own home with someone who wanted me dead, and my son was helping her do it without even realizing it. I sat in the growing darkness of my bedroom, holding my phone and trying to figure out what to do next. I could call the police, but what evidence did I have? I'd seen Ophelia put something in my soup, but I couldn't prove what it was. I had suspicions about my medications, but no proof they'd been tampered with. And who would believe me? A sick, elderly woman accusing her caring daughter-in-law of trying to kill her. Especially when that daughter-in-law had been documenting my apparent mental decline for months. I thought about the nurse, Sarah, who had risked her job to warn me. The note had said she'd seen this before. I needed to find her, to understand what she knew and how she'd recognized what was happening to me. But first, I needed to survive the night. And tomorrow, I needed to start fighting back. A soft knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. "Thelma, I'm going to bed now. Do you need anything?" "No, thank you," I called back, my voice surprisingly steady. "Good night, Ophelia. Good night. Sweet dreams, sweet dreams." As if she was wishing me pleasant thoughts while she plotted my destruction. As if she cared about my comfort while systematically destroying my health. I listened to her footsteps going down the hall to the guest room where she'd been staying, to keep an eye on me while Marcus worked late. How convenient that she was always here, always available to prepare my meals and monitor my condition. For the first time in months, I didn't take any of the pills she'd left for me. I didn't drink the herbal tea. I didn't eat anything she'd prepared. And for the first time in months, I lay awake most of the night, alert and thinking clearly. By morning, I had a plan. I woke up feeling more alert than I had in months, which only confirmed my worst fears. After avoiding Ophelia's medicine for just one night, the fog in my brain was already beginning to clear. I could think more sharply. My hands weren't trembling, and the constant nausea that had plagued me was noticeably better. Ophelia appeared at my door at 7:30 sharp, carrying a breakfast tray. "Good morning, Thelma. How are you feeling today?" I studied her face carefully. In the morning light, she looked different to me now. The smile that had once seemed caring now appeared calculated. The concern in her green eyes looked more like assessment. "Better, actually," I said truthfully. "Much better." Something flickered across her expression. Disappointment? Surprise? "That's wonderful. But you know how these things go. You have good days and bad days. That's why it's so important to stay consistent with your medication and nutrition." She set the tray down on my bedside table. Scrambled eggs, toast, orange juice, and my morning pills arranged in a small dish. The same breakfast routine we'd established months ago when I'd first gotten sick. "I'm not very hungry this morning," I said, testing her reaction. "Thelma, you have to eat. You've lost so much weight already." Her voice carried a note of urgency that I'd never noticed before. "Your body needs fuel to fight whatever's making you sick. Maybe just the toast," I conceded, reaching for the least risky item on the tray. "And your medications," she pressed. Dr. Williams was very specific about taking them at the same time every day. I looked at the small dish containing 3 different pills. For months, I'd trusted Ophelia to manage my medications, to pick them up from the pharmacy, to remind me when to take them. Now I wondered if any of them were actually prescribed by Dr. Williams. "You know what? I want to call Dr. Williams today," I said suddenly. "I want to review all my medications with him directly." Ophelia's hand paused midway to fluffing my pillows. "That's not necessary. I have all the information from your last appointment. Besides, you know how busy his office is. I'd still like to call." "Thelma, you're starting to sound paranoid. This obsession with questioning everything isn't healthy." Her voice had taken on a different tone, sharper and more controlling. "It's probably another symptom of your condition." Paranoid. She was already laying the groundwork to dismiss anything I might say or do as a symptom of mental decline. But I was beginning to understand how this game was played. "You're probably right," I said, forcing myself to sound defeated. "I just wish I felt more like myself." Relief washed over her features. "I know, sweetie. That's why we're exploring other care options. Some place where professionals can monitor you around the clock." Around-the-clock monitoring. By professionals who didn't know me, who would rely on Ophelia's reports about my condition, who would see a sick, confused elderly woman instead of a victim. "I suppose that might be best," I said quietly. Ophelia's smile returned, bright and victorious. "I'm so glad you're being reasonable about this. I've already started looking at some facilities. There's a lovely place about an hour away that specializes in memory care. Memory care. For a condition I didn't actually have, caused by substances I didn't need to be taking. After Ophelia left for work, I immediately called Dr. Williams's office. The receptionist was helpful but confused when I asked about my current medications. Mrs. Richardson, I show that we haven't prescribed any ongoing medications for you. You had some routine blood work done, but Dr. Williams hasn't put you on any regular prescriptions. My hand started shaking again, but this time from anger rather than whatever Ophelia had been giving me. None at all. No, ma'am. Would you like me to check with the doctor? Maybe there's been some kind of mix-up. Yes, please. And I'd like to schedule an appointment as soon as possible. I can fit you in this afternoon at 3 o'clock if that works. After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen trying to process this information. If Dr. Williams hadn't prescribed any medications for me, then what had Ophelia been giving me for months? And where had she gotten pills that looked legitimate enough to fool me? I needed to talk to Marcus, to make him understand what was happening before it was too late. But when I called his office, his secretary told me he was in court all day. I tried his cell phone and got voicemail. Marcus, it's Mom. I need to talk to you urgently. Please call me as soon as you get this message. It's about my health situation, and there are some things you need to know. Then I did something I probably should have done weeks ago. I called my sister Linda in Phoenix. Thelma, how are you feeling, honey? You sounded so much better when you visited last weekend. Linda, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. When I was at your house, did I seem confused or disoriented to you? Confused? Not at all. You seemed tired, but your mind was sharp as ever. We had perfectly normal conversations about everything from politics to that mystery novel you'd been reading. Why? My heart sank. Ophelia's been telling Marcus that I'm having memory problems, that I seem confused and disoriented. There was a long pause. Thelma, that's not true. At least it wasn't true when you were here. You were completely yourself, but I feel confused and disoriented at home. I have trouble thinking clearly. My memory seems fuzzy. Only at home? Only at home. Another pause, longer this time. Thelma, what exactly is Ophelia doing to help with your care? I told her everything. The meal preparation, the medication management, the documentation of my supposed decline. As I spoke, I could hear Linda's breathing grow more agitated. Honey, this doesn't sound right. Have you considered that maybe your symptoms are connected to whatever help she's giving you? I'm starting to think that might be the case. Thelma, listen to me. You need to get out of that house. Come stay with me while you figure this out. I can't just leave. Marcus would think I've lost my mind completely. Then bring Marcus with you. Make him see what you're like when you're away from her influence. Before I could respond, I heard a car in the driveway. Through the window, I saw Ophelia's sedan pulling in. She was home early from work again. Linda, I have to go. Ophelia's here. Thelma, be careful, and call me tonight. I hung up just as Ophelia came through the front door, carrying shopping bags and wearing that bright smile that no longer fooled me. I brought lunch from that deli you like, she announced. Chicken salad sandwich and vegetable soup. You need to keep your strength up for your appointment this afternoon. My appointment. How did she know about my appointment with Dr. Williams? What appointment? I asked carefully. Your 3 o'clock with Dr. Williams. I called to check on some medication questions and his office mentioned you'd scheduled something. She was already unpacking the food, arranging it on plates with practiced efficiency. I thought I'd drive you, since you seemed so anxious this morning. She'd called Dr. Williams's office to check on medication questions, the same medications that weren't actually prescribed. My stomach clenched as I realized she was probably trying to cover her tracks to make sure her story matched whatever records the doctor had. That's very thoughtful, I said, watching her prepare my lunch. But I think I can drive myself. Nonsense. You shouldn't be driving when you're having memory issues. What if you got confused and had an accident? There it was again, the assumption that I was incompetent, the insistence on controlling my movements. But this time, I recognized it for what it was. Imprisonment disguised as care. Actually, I'm feeling much clearer today, I said. The best I've felt in months. Ophelia's hands stilled for just a moment. That's wonderful. But you know how quickly these things can change. 1 minute you're fine, the next you're disoriented. It's better to be safe. She handed me the plate with the sandwich and a bowl of soup. Both looked perfectly normal, but now I understood that normal was the point. Whatever she was using was probably tasteless and odorless, something that would blend seamlessly into food and drink. "I think I'll save this for later," I said, setting the plate aside. My stomach's still a bit unsettled. "Thelma, you have to eat something. You're wasting away to nothing." The urgency in her voice was more pronounced now, almost desperate. She needed me to consume whatever she'd prepared, needed me to be compliant and docile for the doctor's appointment. "Just not right now," I insisted. That's when her mask finally slipped. The caring smile disappeared, replaced by something cold and calculating. "You're being difficult again." This is exactly the kind of behavior that's been worrying Marcus and me. Difficult. For not wanting to eat lunch when I wasn't hungry. For wanting to drive myself to a doctor's appointment. For questioning medications that weren't actually prescribed. "I'm not trying to be difficult," I said quietly. "I just want to understand what's happening to me. What's happening to you is that you're sick, and you're getting worse. And the more you fight against the people trying to help you, the worse you're going to get." The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. Continue resisting, and my condition would deteriorate faster. Stop fighting, and maybe the decline would be more gradual. But I wasn't going to stop fighting. Not now that I finally understood what I was fighting against. My phone rang, and Marcus's name appeared on the screen. Ophelia watched me carefully as I answered. "Mom, I got your message. What's this about?" "Marcus, I need you to come over right away. There are some things about my health situation that we need to discuss. Can't it wait? I'm swamped today, and Ophelia said she's driving you to your appointment this afternoon." "No, it can't wait. And I need you to hear this from me, not from Ophelia." There was a pause, and I could practically hear him weighing his options. "Mom, you're starting to sound really agitated. Maybe you should take one of your calm-down pills and we'll talk tonight." Calm-down pills. More medication that Ophelia had convinced him I needed. "Marcus, please, I'm your mother, and I'm asking you to come over right now. This is important." Another pause. Then, reluctantly, "Fine. I'll be there in 20 minutes. As I hung up, I saw Ophelia watching me with something that might have been respect. I'd managed to get my son to come over despite her subtle attempts to prevent it. But I could also see her mind working, calculating how to handle this new development. "I'm glad Marcus is coming," she said finally. "Maybe he can help you understand why you need more intensive care." 20 minutes later, my son walked through the front door, and I realized that this conversation would determine whether I lived or died. Because if I couldn't convince Marcus of the truth, I would be completely at Ophelia's mercy. And mercy, I was beginning to understand, was not something she possessed. Marcus looked tired when he walked through the door, his suit wrinkled from a long day in court. At 34, he still had his father's strong jaw and serious eyes, but there was something different about him now. A distance that hadn't been there before his marriage to Ophelia. "Mom, what's this emergency about?" he asked, glancing between Ophelia and me. I had to reschedule 3 meetings to get here. I took a deep breath, knowing this might be my only chance to save my own life. "Marcus, I need you to sit down. There are some things about my illness that I need to tell you." Ophelia immediately moved to stand behind Marcus's chair, placing a protective hand on his shoulder. "Thelma's been having a really difficult day," she said softly. "I think the stress of being sick is starting to affect her thinking. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in months," I said firmly, looking directly at my son. "Marcus, Dr. Williams hasn't prescribed any ongoing medications for me. I called his office this morning to confirm." Marcus frowned. "What do you mean? You take 3 different pills every morning." "That's what I thought too. But when I spoke to Dr. Williams's office, they told me he hasn't put me on any regular prescriptions at all." Ophelia's grip tightened on Marcus's shoulder. "Thelma, you're confused again. We've been over this with Dr. Williams multiple times. Maybe you're forgetting the conversations." "I'm not forgetting anything," I said, my voice stronger now. "And there's something else. I feel dramatically better when I don't take those pills or eat the food Ophelia prepares for me. Yesterday, for the first time in months, I skipped everything she gave me. This morning I woke up alert and clear-headed." Marcus looked uncomfortable, shifting in his chair. Mom, you're starting to sound paranoid. Ophelia's been nothing but helpful since you got sick. Has she? I stood up and walked to my purse, pulling out my phone. Marcus, I want you to call Dr. Williams's office right now. Ask them specifically about my current prescriptions. That's not necessary, Ophelia interjected quickly. I spoke to them this morning about her medication concerns. Sometimes elderly patients get confused about their treatments. Elderly patients. The way she said it made my skin crawl, like I was already mentally incompetent in her mind. Then you won't mind if Marcus makes the call, I said, holding out my phone. Marcus hesitated, looking between his wife and his mother. Mom, this is getting weird. Why would Ophelia lie about your medications? I don't know why, I admitted, but I know she is lying. Thelma, Ophelia's voice was gentle but firm, you're having another episode. This is exactly what I was telling Marcus about. The paranoid thoughts, the accusations. It's progressing faster than we thought. Another episode. She had a ready explanation for everything. A medical-sounding reason to dismiss any concerns I raised. Fine, I said, walking to the kitchen. Let me show you something else. I went to the cabinet where I kept my medications and brought back the 3 bottles Ophelia had been giving me pills from. Marcus, look at these dates. He took the bottles and examined the labels. These are from 6 months ago, before you got sick. Exactly. These bottles should have been empty months ago, but they're still half full. So either I haven't been taking the medications consistently, or these aren't the medications I've been taking. Marcus looked at the bottles more carefully, his lawyer instincts finally kicking in. The dates don't make sense, he admitted. There's a reasonable explanation, Ophelia said smoothly. I had them refilled, but the pharmacy sometimes reuses the old labels. It's a computer glitch they've been having. She had an answer for everything, but I wasn't done. Marcus, I want you to drive me to my appointment with Dr. Williams today. Alone. No Ophelia. That's not a good idea, Ophelia said immediately. You were disoriented this morning and your driving isn't safe anymore. I'm not driving. Marcus is driving me. I don't think you should go alone with your mother when she's having an episode like this, Ophelia said to Marcus. What if she becomes agitated or confused while you're there? You won't know how to handle it. I watched my son's face as he processed this. The woman he loved and trusted was telling him his mother was mentally unstable and potentially dangerous. The mother who had raised him was claiming that same woman was trying to harm her. Mom, Marcus said slowly, maybe Ophelia should come with us, just in case. My heart sank. He was choosing her version of reality over mine. Marcus, please, I'm begging you. Just this once. Trust me over her. Something in my voice must have reached him because he paused. Why is this so important to you? And because I think someone has been putting things in my food and giving me pills that aren't prescribed by any doctor. And I think that someone is slowly killing me. The words hung in the air like a bomb that had just exploded. Marcus stared at me in shock, and Ophelia's face went very pale. Mom, that's a serious accusation, Marcus said quietly. It's a serious situation. Ophelia recovered quickly. Marcus, this is exactly what I was worried about. She's developing paranoid delusions. This is a common symptom of certain types of dementia. I don't have dementia, I said firmly, and I can prove what I'm saying. I walked back to my bedroom and returned with my phone, opening the photos I'd taken the night before. Yesterday evening, I watched Ophelia add something from a small bottle to my soup. I took pictures of the food she brought me. I showed Marcus the photos of the untouched tray. I didn't eat any of it. I poured it down the sink. And this morning, for the first time in months, I felt normal. Marcus examined the photos, his expression troubled. These just show a tray of food, Mom. Call Dr. Williams, I said again. Right now, ask him specifically what medications he's prescribed for me. This time, Marcus didn't hesitate. He dialed the number I gave him and waited. Yes, this is Marcus Richardson calling about my mother. Thelma Richardson. I need to verify what medications Dr. Williams has prescribed for her current condition. I watched Ophelia's face as Marcus waited for the response. Her composure was starting to crack, just slightly. I see, Marcus said after a moment. No ongoing prescriptions at all? Nothing for her current symptoms? The silence in the room was deafening. Thank you, Marcus said, hanging up. He looked at Ophelia with confusion. They say Dr. Williams hasn't prescribed any medications for Mom. that her test results have been inconclusive, but there's been no treatment plan involving prescription drugs. Ophelia's face had gone from pale to flushed. That can't be right. There must be some confusion in their records. What medications have you been giving my mother? Marcus's voice had changed, taking on the tone he used in court when questioning a hostile witness. The ones Dr. Williams prescribed, Ophelia insisted, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. Which ones specifically? What are the names of the drugs? Ophelia opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time since I'd known her, she seemed at a loss for words. And where did you get them? Marcus continued. If they're not in Dr. Williams' system, what pharmacy filled these prescriptions? There must be some miscommunication between the offices, she stammered. Maybe Dr. Williams' staff made an error. But Marcus was a criminal defense attorney. He knew evasion when he heard it. Mom, he said, turning to me, get your purse. We're going to Dr. Williams's office right now. Marcus, I really think I should come with you, Ophelia said, her voice higher than usual, in case your mother has another episode. No, Marcus said firmly. You're staying here. For a moment, Ophelia looked like she might argue. Then something shifted in her expression, and I saw a flash of something that made my blood run cold. It wasn't concern or confusion. It was calculation. She was already planning her next move. Of course, she said, her smile returning but not quite reaching her eyes. I'll be here when you get back. I hope Dr. Williams can clear up this confusion. As Marcus and I drove to the doctor's office, he was quiet for several minutes. Finally, he spoke. Mom, if what you're suggesting is true, it means I've been married to someone who's been trying to kill my mother. I know how it sounds, I said. I know it's hard to believe. The medication thing is definitely wrong, he admitted. But putting something in your food, that's attempted murder. Yes, it is. Why would she do that? What would she gain? I'd been thinking about that question all day. Your inheritance, Marcus. If something happens to me, everything I have goes to you, and what's yours becomes hers. Marcus was quiet again as we pulled into the medical center parking lot. Mom, if this is true, if she really has been poisoning you, then we need to involve the police. I know, but first I need Dr. Williams to confirm that I'm not actually sick, that there's nothing wrong with me that can't be explained by someone giving me harmful substances. As we walked into the medical building, I felt hopeful for the first time in months. Marcus believed me, or at least he was willing to investigate, but I also felt a chill of fear. Ophelia was back at my house, alone, with whatever substances she'd been using, and now she knew that I was onto her. What would she do when cornered? How far was she willing to go to protect her secret? By the time we finished with Dr. Williams and had our answers, it might already be too late. Dr. Williams confirmed what I already knew, but desperately needed documented. After a thorough examination and review of all my test results, he found no underlying medical condition that would explain my symptoms. More importantly, he agreed to order immediate blood and urine tests to screen for foreign substances. Mrs. Richardson, he said, his expression grave. If someone has been giving you unauthorized medications or other substances, we need to find out exactly what they are. Some of these compounds can cause permanent damage if exposure continues. Marcus sat beside me, his face a mask of controlled fury. How long before we get the results? I'm marking this as urgent. We should have preliminary results by tomorrow morning, full analysis by Friday. As we left the medical center, Marcus was quiet until we reached the car. Then he turned to me, his voice shaking with emotion. Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have listened to you. I should have questioned what was happening instead of just accepting Ophelia's explanations. You trusted your wife, I said gently. That's what you were supposed to do. I was supposed to protect my mother, too. We drove home in heavy silence, both of us dreading the confrontation that was waiting. But when we pulled into the driveway, Ophelia's car was gone. Marcus frowned as we walked to the front door. She said she'd be here when we got back. Inside, the house felt different, empty in a way that had nothing to do with Ophelia's physical absence. On the kitchen counter, I found a note written in her neat handwriting. Marcus and Thelma, I realized that my presence might be making things more stressful for everyone. I've gone to stay with my sister for a few days to give you both some space. I hope Dr. Williams was able to help clarify things. Love, Ophelia. Marcus read the note over my shoulder. She's running. Or regrouping, I said. This isn't over. I was right. The next morning, Dr. Williams called with the preliminary blood test results. I had significant levels of several substances in my system that had no business being there. A mild sedative, a drug typically used to treat nausea that in larger doses could cause confusion and memory problems, and traces of a plant extract that could cause fatigue and digestive issues. Mrs. Richardson, these substances, taken together over an extended period, would definitely cause the symptoms you've been experiencing. The combination is quite sophisticated, designed to mimic various illness symptoms while keeping the victim functional enough not to raise immediate alarm. Marcus was on the extension line. Dr. Williams, this is clearly deliberate poisoning. We need to contact the police immediately. That afternoon, Detective Sarah Martinez sat in my living room, taking detailed notes as I recounted everything that had happened. She was a woman in her 40s with kind but sharp eyes, and she listened without judgment as I told my story. Mrs. Richardson, these cases are more common than people think, she said when I finished. We see this type of gradual poisoning in domestic situations, often with financial motives. The challenge is always proving intent and gathering sufficient evidence. What kind of evidence do you need? Marcus asked. We'll need to test any remaining food or medications in the house. We'll want to examine Mrs. Richardson's medical records to show the timeline of symptoms, and we'll need to trace where the substances in her system came from. Over the next several hours, Detective Martinez and a forensics team methodically went through my kitchen and bathroom. They found traces of the same substances from my blood test in an herbal tea blend that Ophelia had been giving me nightly. Hidden in the back of her purse, which she'd left behind in her hurried departure, they found 3 small vials containing concentrated forms of the same compounds. This is enough for charges, Detective Martinez told us. Attempted murder, at minimum, but Ophelia had vanished. Her sister claimed she'd never arrived, and her cell phone was disconnected. It was as if she'd simply disappeared. 2 days later, I got a call from Sarah, the nurse who had saved my life with her warning note. Mrs. Richardson, I saw the news about your case. I wanted you to know that the woman you knew as Ophelia isn't who she claimed to be. My hands began to shake as Sarah continued. Her real name is Olivia Chen. She's done this before, at least twice that I know of. 5 years ago, she was married to an elderly man in Oregon who died of what appeared to be complications from Alzheimer's disease. Before that, she was a caregiver for a wealthy widow in California, who also died from a mysterious illness. How do you know all this? Because the widow in California was my mother. The words hit me like a physical blow. Your mother? She was 78 when Olivia came to work for her as a live-in companion. Within 6 months, my mother was showing signs of dementia and declining health. I tried to raise concerns, but Olivia was so convincing, so caring. She had my mother convinced that I was trying to steal her money. Sarah's voice broke slightly as she continued. My mother died 18 months later, leaving everything to Olivia. By the time I figured out what had really happened, Olivia had disappeared with over $200,000. Why didn't you go to the police then? I tried, but without proof, without the body being tested for foreign substances, there was no case. My mother had been cremated, and all the evidence was gone. So when you saw me, I recognized the symptoms immediately. The gradual decline, the confusion, the way you described feeling better when you were away from home. I couldn't let it happen again. Detective Martinez was fascinated by this information. Within hours, she was coordinating with police departments in Oregon and California, building a case that spanned multiple states and multiple victims. The breakthrough came a week later when Olivia was arrested trying to board a flight to Mexico using a fake passport. In her luggage, they found more vials of the substances she'd been using to poison me, along with fake identification documents and over $50,000 in cash. The trial was held 6 months later. I testified about my experience, as did Marcus about how he'd been manipulated into believing I was mentally declining. Sarah testified about her mother's death and how she'd recognized the pattern. Medical experts explained how the combination of substances could mimic various disease symptoms while slowly destroying someone's health. Olivia, or Ophelia, as I'd known her, sat through it all with the same serene expression she'd worn while poisoning me for months. Even when the jury returned a guilty verdict on charges of attempted murder, conspiracy, and fraud, she showed no emotion. She was sentenced to 25 years in prison. The judge called it one of the most calculating and cruel crimes he'd ever seen. But the real healing began after the trial ended. Marcus and I spent months rebuilding our relationship, talking through how Olivia had manipulated both of us, how she'd gradually isolated me and turned him against his own mother. He was filled with guilt, but I helped him understand that he'd been a victim too. She was a professional, I told him. This was what she did. She studied people, found their weaknesses, and exploited them. You couldn't have known. My health returned completely within a few months of stopping the substances Olivia had been giving me. The fatigue disappeared, my mind cleared, and I regained the weight I'd lost. Dr. Williams marveled at my recovery, saying it was like watching someone come back from the dead. A year later, I was contacted by Detective Martinez again. 2 more cases had emerged. Women in different states who had experienced similar symptoms while in relationships with men who had since disappeared. The investigation into what they were now calling the caregiver murders was expanding. I testified as a witness in those cases too, helping other families understand what had happened to their loved ones. Sarah and I became close friends, bonded by our shared experience of nearly losing our mothers to the same predator. Today, I'm 65 years old and healthier than I've been in years. I live independently in a small house near my sister Linda in Phoenix, where I moved after selling my old home. Too many bad memories there. Too many reminders of how close I came to becoming another of Olivia's victims. Marcus visits every few weeks, sometimes bringing his new girlfriend, a kind woman who reminds me what genuine care looks like. He's been in therapy, working through the guilt and the realization that he'd been manipulated into nearly losing his mother. Sometimes I think about that day in Dr. Williams' office when I found the note in my purse. If Sarah hadn't had the courage to risk her job to warn a stranger, I would be dead now. Olivia would have continued her slow poisoning until my body could no longer fight off the toxins, and everyone would have mourned the sad decline of an elderly woman who'd succumbed to a mysterious illness. Instead, I'm alive, I'm free, and I'm helping other families recognize the signs of what happened to me. The police estimate that Olivia may have been responsible for at least 8 deaths over the past 15 years, all elderly people who died of apparent natural causes while in her care. The most important thing I learned is that evil rarely announces itself with dramatic gestures. It comes wearing a caring smile, offering help you didn't know you needed, slowly and methodically destroying your life while convincing everyone that it's trying to save you. But I also learned that sometimes, when everything seems hopeless, help comes from unexpected places. A stranger's courage can save your life. Your own instincts, when you finally listen to them, can lead you to safety. I'm grateful every day that I found the strength to fight back, to question what everyone else accepted, to choose survival over compliance. Because in the end, that choice didn't just save my life. It helped put a predator behind bars and potentially saved countless other victims. The nightmares have mostly stopped now. The fear that every meal might be poisoned, that every act of kindness might hide malicious intent, those feelings have faded with time and healing. I trust people again, but I also trust myself more. I listen to my instincts, ask questions when things don't feel right, and never again will I let anyone convince me that my own perceptions are wrong. Most importantly, I'm no longer afraid. For months, I lived in terror of the person who was supposed to be caring for me. Now I live in peace, surrounded by people who genuinely love me, free from the shadow of someone who saw my death as a stepping stone to their own comfort. That's what real victory looks like. Not revenge, but simply the freedom to live without fear. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below, and meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.